All right, it's finally time for the second unit. We're really getting into it now. Let's not just look at maps all day. The second unit is all about population, why populations are where they are, what causes them to grow, to move, to decrease, all those things. I am here with some more flowers, and look, they even match the background. I'll explain that because that deals with culture at some point. So let's get started. We're going to start off with a big word, ecumene. And this goes back to like the olden days. By that, I mean like ancient times. And it's a word that describes the areas of permanent settlement on the earth. So, not areas that people are just sailing over or passing through, nomads passing in, but permanent settlement. So, wherever that would be on the earth's surface. Now, maybe it could be also on another planet's surface someday. But for now, we're not there yet. So think of why are these places where they are? Well, it has to do with the climate and weather patterns. It has to be a place where, it's not too cold, not too hot, it's just livable. Think of the people right now evacuating Tampa, right? If hurricanes continue to be so common, they might say, hey, this climate does not make this area sustainable to be part of our ecumene. Think of the landforms. Where can you survive? You want to be near water at some part. You're not going to be like living on the edge of a cliff, most likely, or in mud, right? What kind of landforms are good for survival? And like I said, water, not just to drink, but also for plants, for animals, for all the things necessary for survival. So, besides these physical features, there's human features that help decide what part of this ecumene would people live in if they have the opportunity to even move in the first place, right? A lot of people are just sort of, they're born and they're part of the ecumene, and that is where they will live most of their life. So, when people go about, part of why they may go to another area, it has a cultural connection. They want to be with my people, so to speak. For example, when many immigrants came and continue to come to the United States, they often settle with, even if not their own family, but with people that are from where they came from, right? So they have that bond. It helps them with the transition and it makes them feel at home in their new home. Also, let's think of economics. How do I make money? Um, how will I not have all my money taken from me, right? Taxes. Can you have a living? All those sorts of factors. The history of an area are going to matter as well. Is it an independent country? Maybe it's not, right? Like what is the back history of this country? Is it something I'm comfortable being part of? And also political life. People often forget that political reasons are why people move to areas they do as well. People fled communism in the past to come to America, whether it was from someplace in the former Soviet Union during the Hungarian Revolution, things like that. This example is Casimir Kinsel in 1848. He was fighting against some of the aristocrats in what's now Germany. Right, there were a lot of different provinces. There was lots of revolutions going on in Europe at that time. A lot of pro-democratic revolutions. He got in trouble for fighting one of them, and they said, "Well, you can leave." So he came to the United States and eventually fought in our Civil War for the North to support that democratic value after working most of his life on a farm in New Jersey. So this photo was taken towards the end of his life in Vineland, New Jersey, and this would be my great 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 grandfather. So here's just an example. We can look at China, and if you look at China, look at this population density, right? Different shades of area, chloropleth map. And the darker areas are where more people live. So when you look at how large China is, keep in mind that most of the people of China only live off to one part of it. They live where its soil is the most fertile, and that's on the eastern quarter, a little bit more of the country. where their breadbasket is, so to speak. So the area of the greatest population, correlates to that, so of the land. And think about, in our country, well, why do people settle where they do for physical reasons? Not many people actually live up in the mountains. Look what happened quite recently to the south. Look here in western North Carolina. So, why did people live in parts of the Appalachian Mountains? Well, to be honest, this type of weather reaction is not typical. If it was, it might be more rare. But even still, mountains are not as common to live in as opposed to valleys or plains. But it ties in with some of those other things we talked about, history and culture and things like that. There's a very distinct regional culture to the Appalachian regions that people sort of have a strong bond to. The immigrants that came there in the beginning were this was before the Civil War. Lots of Irish, German, even some Chinese immigrants, right? So you have these cultural reasons that really explain part of why people live there. And let's talk about density. So if we look back to China, we can see that the eastern part is very dense. The western part is not very dense. There's not an equal distribution of the population in China. Look how much these flowers not only match the quilt, but match this map. Have you noticed this? All right. So density is the number of people in a space, usually a square mile, a square kilometer, something like that. The distribution is how are people spread in that space. So notice in these two boxes, say they're square miles, the density is the same. There's still 3 people per square mile, but their distribution is very different. On the left, you have an even distribution of people for 3 of the 4 quadrants, whereas on the right, the 3 people are clustered, if you will, in the center of that square mile. And there's different ways to identify population density. We can first talk about arithmetic density, and that's just basically the number of people per square mile or kilometer. So you see some areas are going to be more dense. New Jersey, my friends, is the densest state in the nation. Physiological density. This is the number of people per unit of arable land. Basically, think farmable land, right? So population density might not be even relevant in an area if it's like desert or a place that it would be more difficult for life to be sustainable. But if you look just to hey, of all the areas people can live, where do they, and what factors determine that, right? So physiological, the people per unit of arable land. Now let's talk about agricultural density. This is pretty easy to identify with because agriculture is going to make sense. So think of where is there agriculture, think of where the land can be farmed. So it is just the number of farmers per unit, whether it's square miles, acre, of farm of land. Now he needs potatoes, and his daughter is involved, right? So keep in mind, how do you measure farmers? Because sometimes family is involved, and they might not be like official, but they still farm. Also, keep in mind how technology has changed this, right? In some areas, you don't need as many farmers because you have mechanized and all sorts of advanced technology and machinery. Whereas other areas might have more farmers, but that's only because their technology isn't the same. Think of the Amish people who are using like horses to plow, right? So you're going to require more farmers in an area like that. I want to give some examples now. So this is data from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, 2022 census on agriculture. So we know that the regular census is every 10 years, but there's other type of census data that comes out that are more specific. So for example, the U.S. Department of Agriculture runs their own census. Now, there's different types of farming. And a big one that has grown recently, especially in this area, is agrotourism or ecotourism. So if you've been over here down the road, right, are they an active farm all year long? Right? Where do they make a lot of their money? It's come, this time of year, or maybe time of year where they're selling, having like a sunflower maze, some farms, things like that, right? So let's just go over this example. So from 2022, they reported that in New Jersey, there were almost 10,000 farms, too short. That was 115 more farms than just 10 years earlier. That's a pretty significant increase. Interesting enough is that this um, is opposite of the national trend. The national trend is that farms across the country, the numbers have decreased by 7%, right? So once again, think about like, in the Midwest, there's probably not as many ecotourism, agrotourism farms. They're probably more like, growing corn for cows or for hard corn syrup for you to, um, you know, unfortunately eat, right? So there's some difference there. Now, but here's another factor. It said that farmland in New Jersey, there's about 712 acres. That's actually less acres than there were 10 years ago. So the number of farms went up, but the acreage of farms went down. So you can sort of make certain assumptions or hypotheses in your mind of why that would be. The national average is that the acreage of farms went down about 2%, right? So about 7% less farms, about 2% less farmland across the country. It's on pace for things like that. So, what you can do when we go over, like, all the different types of densities is for all you math and you science equation people, right? This is the STEM part of this course. You can actually have formulas to like find out the agricultural density, the arithmetic, density, physiological density of that area. So it's basically the number of land over um, or the people over the land, right? So for example, here I sort of had to make approximations. Now, 10,000 farms, there's probably more than 10,000 farmers. I really would be shocked if only one farmer was per farm. That would be amazing. But let's just use that number for this example. So if there's 10,000 farmers in New Jersey and there's 734,000 acres, if you divide that number, that's the agricultural density number in New Jersey. So you could compare that to the agricultural number, if we had this of Iowa or California. You compare it to a country as well, right? So think of that when you think of the other things as well. So the physiological density is the population over arable land, right? So what is the population divided by what is the number where people could actually farm? That is that area's, it doesn't have to be country, that is that area's physiological density. All right. I mentioned before that New Jersey is the densest in the nation. This shows you here with another chloropleth map. It does not indicate physiological density because this map does not indicate the areas that are not arable. Right? Arithmetic density is just the population over the land or surface area. So if you were able to know the square miles and you did the math here, you could do that. Right? So we can play around with some numbers and practice, but it's really just a fraction that you're figuring out. It's not like the quadratic equation or anything like that. All right, so this unit is going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you're ready. And I hope this was a great introduction for you. All right, so signing out for now, and we'll talk about this soon. I don't know if the flowers will still be blooming by then, though.